opioid crisis is not only dangerous for those addicted to the drugs, but also for first responders. We told you yesterday about an Ohio police officer who survived an accidental overdose from street fentanyl after a drug bust. The DEA says it is 40 to 50 times more powerful than street heroin. Jim Axelrod spoke with that officer, and he's in East Liverpool, Ohio, where this all happened. Jim, good morning.
Good morning. Officer Chris Green of the East Liverpool Police Department came in contact with fentanyl while helping to arrest a couple of drug suspects during a traffic stop. Anyone who wants to know just how powerful and deadly fentanyl is should hear his story. Right about here, start to feel a little funny?
Yeah, as I walked through the door, I was almost pulled back by an alert colleague, another officer. What's this white powder? And that's when I reached back. Accidentally came in contact.
You're standing roughly right here?
Yeah.
Just a few hours earlier, Officer Chris Green was helping arrest two men on alleged drug charges who were in this car. You can see the white powder on the floor. Officer Green doesn't know how some of that powder got on his sweatshirt, but when it ended up on his fingertips, that's all it took.
I fall backwards, and I'm trying to hold on to anything I can grasp.
Luckily, EMTs were already at the police station. Officer Green was given one dose of the opioid antidote naloxone and then rushed to the hospital where he received 3 more doses. So a total of 4 doses of Narcan.
Yes, for simply touching that and or inhaling.
Am I being a little over dramatic here to say you could have died?
I don't think so.
Chris's fiancée, Stacy Birch, knows he has a dangerous job, but worried more about bullets than drugs.
Did you ever think he'd encounter something like this?
Absolutely not. My worst fear is, like, getting shot.
But fentanyl, especially in powder form, is so dangerous and now spreading across the country so fast
fentanyl now is being sold
that the DEA made a video warning police and emergency responders of the risks.
As long as this stuff is on the street, our men and women, our first responders, are going to be bumping into it, and it's extraordinarily dangerous for them.
When you hear about these stories, you think, that's only on TV. It's not going to happen to me. That's not going to happen to me. This drug doesn't care who it kills.
No conscience.
No conscience.
Officer Green says the suspects admitted to him that the white powder was fentanyl. Now, this happened on a Friday. Officer Green was scheduled to be off Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, back to work Tuesday. So, Gail, this harrowing story, and Officer Green didn't miss a single day of work.
Wow, go Officer Green, but another layer to the opioid crisis.
Bogus fentanyl drug warning. Touching small amounts of drugs could be lethal to officers. Last month, the Drug Enforcement Agency reissued a warning to police officers claiming that touching carfentanil and fentanyl could be lethal. Just touching fentanyl or accidentally inhaling the substance during enforcement activity or field testing the substance can result in absorption through the skin, and that is one of the biggest dangers with fentanyl. The onset of adverse health effects, such as disorientation, coughing, sedation, respiratory distress, or cardiac arrest, is very rapid and profound, usually occurring within minutes of exposure. A Drug Enforcement Administration report titled Fentanyl: A Briefing Guide for First Responders mentions numerous instances of people dying from overdosing, but fails to document a single instance of police officer deaths as a result of touching drugs. The report also fails to mention that it was written by numerous police officers from across the country. We need everybody in the United States to understand how dangerous this is, Drug Enforcement Administration Chief Chuck Rosenberg said. Exposure to an amount equivalent to a few grains of sand can kill you. When police officers start writing fake medical reports, designed to scare the public, everyone should take notice. Police told to wear hazmat suits to test for drugs. The report warns officers not to field test for drugs unless they are trained in hazmat handling. The report goes on to say police officers should wear Level A personal protective equipment if they find large amounts of drugs. The Drug Enforcement Agency also claims fentanyl exposure to police officers is an unprecedented threat. What is noteworthy about the report is, there are no peer reviews by toxicologists or doctors substantiating their claims. The Drug Enforcement Agency is beginning to sound more and more like Homeland Security. For years DHS has been using their National Terrorism Advisory System and DHS monthly SAFECOM bulletins to scare the public. It's also worth noting that the report did not provide a single documented case of first responders dying from touching fentanyl. And 2 Google searches for fentanyl drug overdose kills police officer and fentanyl drug overdose kills first responders turned up 0 articles of police dying from touching drugs. So, what's the truth about fentanyl? Police officers will not overdose from touching fentanyl. The Philadelphia Inquirer says, getting an overdose from touching fentanyl is highly unlikely. It's just not plausible that getting a small amount of fentanyl on your skin is going to cause significant opioid toxicity. You don't absorb enough drug fast enough to get toxicity that way, said Andrew Stolbach, an emergency physician and medical toxicologist at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. That sort of incidental exposure would not cause such severe opioid toxicity, said Joseph D'Orazio, a Temple University emergency physician and medical toxicologist. Yes, 2 to 3 milligrams of fentanyl would be sufficient to make most people stop breathing if it found its way into the bloodstream. However, fentanyl just isn't absorbed through skin into your blood quickly or efficiently enough to make this kind of dose possible from incidental contact, Stolbach said. A clinical instructor says police cannot overdose from touching fentanyl. Neither fentanyl nor even its ultra-potent cousin carfentanil, 2 of the most powerful opioids known to humanity, can cause clinically significant effects, let alone near-death experiences, from mere skin exposure.
It's treatable. Being a bitch, though. Nothing we can do about that.
This month, Massachusetts became the first state to ban fentanyl and carfentanil from being brought into courthouses as exhibits, out of concern that these substances are simply too dangerous to be in public places. The policy is based in part on the idea that even minuscule amounts of skin exposure to these drugs can be life-threatening. This is false, and we fear that it will worsen what is already a public health crisis. This false belief about the danger of these drugs seems to stem from several unsubstantiated though widely disseminated media reports over the past year. As we saw in the beginning of this documentary, patrolman Christopher Green became ill after brushing some powder off his uniform that he picked up while searching a suspect's car. First reported by local news in Ohio, the story was picked up by CBS This Morning, The Washington Post and CNN, to name a few. In another case, also in Ohio, 3 nurses went from cleaning a patient's room to waking up in hospital beds of their own, after local media reported it, and the Associated Press and U.S. News World Report took it national. In both cases, the victims were given Narcan, the highly effective opioid reversal agent, and ultimately recovered. But the damage was done. As far as we can see, the mainstream media does not follow up on these stories because the real story would slow down the propaganda machine. Both stories are examples of the post hoc fallacy. Just because somebody received Narcan and later recovered is not by itself proof that the medication had any more effect than that other tried and true antidote for what are likely to have been severe panic attacks. Indeed, given the tall tales circulating in the press and in law enforcement circles about the supposed hazard of passive fentanyl exposure, one can hardly blame them for panicking. This paranoia is reflected in the new Massachusetts courtroom policy, which bolsters the delusion that opioids can kill via unintended casual contact. As emergency physicians, we are concerned not just about this massive public misperception but also about its consequences to public health if emergency medical workers or other care providers are scared out of performing their normal life-saving duties.
Substance a Columbus police officer came in contact with before he was administered Narcan. Body cam video shows police helping him to the ground at a drug stop last weekend. Initially, police believed the substance could have been fentanyl, so they used Narcan. Lab tests show the substance was methamphetamine. Narcan is used to counteract opioids, and methamphetamine is not an opioid. Still, police say it was the right move.
You want to do it preventatively because you don't know if there's fentanyl mixed in with that stuff. That's somewhat that's going on now very frequently, is that they're mixing fentanyl with all kinds of drugs, marijuana, methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin. So yeah, kudos to that officer who thought quickly and was able to administer it.
Well, the officer who came in contact with the drug is okay. He is expected to return to work on Monday.
Anything else dangerous in the car that I need to worry about? Are you here by yourself? There's nobody else in there? We're going to be coming back to the car. All right. Do me a favor, have a seat in there. I'm going to talk to you. Are you okay? No. I'm sorry to 24. 151, send us a 24, possible overdose. No. In the car. What is that?
She called it ice. I swear to God, that's what she called it.
Fentanyl in it?
Not that I know of.
Okay, well, we have an officer having an effect right now. There's no fentanyl not in it?
Please don't tell me nothing like that.
Let her know we don't know. Possible meth, we're not sure. Oh, he's doing it. You do it. Come here. One in each nostril. Is it going in?
Gotta screw it in.
Okay. There it goes. It just squirt it out. Squirt it out. Suck it up. Suck it up that nostril.
Yeah, I'm going all this.
You're good. 151, Narcan administered. Get him. Give me another gun. Or glove. Give me another glove. Here's the first hit. Here. He had one shot of Narcan, loaded up another one, but he only had one.
Sit back here and talk. Yeah, get you out of public. Perfect. I love that idea.
152 minutes on 2.
We now know what substance a Columbus police officer came in contact with before he was administered Narcan. Body cam video shows police helping him to the ground at a drug stop last weekend. Initially, police believed the substance could have been fentanyl, so they used Narcan. Lab tests show the substance was methamphetamine. Narcan is used to counteract opioids, and methamphetamine is not an opioid. Still, police say it was the right move.
You want to do it preventatively because you don't know if there's fentanyl mixed in with that stuff. That's somewhat that's going on now very frequently, is that they're mixing fentanyl with all kinds of drugs, marijuana, methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin. So yeah, kudos to that officer who thought quickly and was able to administer it.
Well, the officer who came in contact with the drug is okay. He is expected to return to work on Monday.
The illegal drugs war will not be sidelined. Instead, it will be as relentless and chilling, if you will, as on the day it began.
It is one of the biggest seizures of an opioid drug in U.S. history.
Actually, all of our seizures have come from China and Hong Kong.
Fentanyl killed 26 million people.
Fentanyl is so toxic.
That is absolutely typical.
It's promising to defeat the opioid crisis that killed more than 50,000 Americans last year.
19,000 of them were related to fentanyl.
Fentanyl. Of heroin and an opioid called fentanyl.
Heroin laced with fentanyl is the better high.
Revived by an antidote called Narcan.
The opioid epidemic. Overcome addiction in America. Drug overdoses are the leading cause of opioids kill an estimated 140 people every day.
China, Hong Kong, fentanyl.
Opioid emergency. Federal emergency life-saving drug that reverses the effects of opioid overdose.
Front lines in the opioid crisis.
Will overcome addiction with an advertising campaign.
Few things in my life have frightened me as much as the drug epidemic among our children.
Help your children to just say no.
Opioid deaths have been on the rise. New Hampshire is on the front lines of the crisis.
Front lines in the opioid crisis.
Need to turn the tide, beat this epidemic.
Opioid Commission, hundreds of billions of dollars for the nation to deal with the opioid crisis.
And at a time when your mailman may be an unwitting drug dealer, it's also the front lines in the opioid crisis.
The newest tools in the hunt for illegal opioids. He witnessed after the X-ray machine revealed an unknown object. Fentanyl is so toxic that officers wear gloves and masks to avoid accidental contact.
This is our detention room.
Just one room away.
Fentanyl, fentanyl again. Fentanyl, fentanyl again. Fentanyl again.
Different fentanyl analogs, all those different fentanyls.
Critics say President Trump's declaration of a public health emergency does not do enough to fight the opioid epidemic. The president pledged, quote, "We will overcome addiction in America."
Oh, that's a very big gap. Thank you very much.
Fentanyl is killing Canadians at an alarming rate.
Expectancy in America declined in 2016, many from opioids.
From powerful synthetic opioids like fentanyl that are doubled. What do you do about drugs that are illegally obtained on the street?
Compared to some of these other drugs, how strong is fentanyl?
It's much stronger.
Police and first responders around the country, including right here in Maryland, about the dangers of fentanyl. They say law enforcement could end up being victims of an overdose by just accidentally touching or even inhaling the powerful drug. WJZ's Live, Ava Joy Burnett tells us departments are worried about this risk. Ava Joy.
Vic, good evening to you. The DEA is ringing the alarm in this potentially deadly problem. It's an occupational hazard that some people are already experiencing. First responders out to save others now have another life to worry about, their own.
Let me say this again. You can be in grave danger if...
Just today, the Drug Enforcement Administration sent out an urgent alert to first responders about the dangers of fentanyl. Simply touching or even inhaling small amounts could be deadly. A close call this Harford County deputy experienced just last month.
And then I just shut it, and about 2 seconds after I shut it, I started sweating profusely. My face started burning.
The DEA says fentanyl is similar to morphine, but it could be 50 to 100 times more powerful, and that's why it's so dangerous. Dr. Emmanuel O'Kay with Sinai Hospital says there are challenges when it comes to treatment.
There's so many forms of the drug that are mixed with other drugs that makes it very, very tricky to deal with, because a lot of times we don't know specifically what the mixtures are.
Fentanyl-related deaths have dramatically increased in Maryland from 17 in 2007 to more than 700 in 2016. Rod Rosenstein, Maryland's former U.S. attorney, who's now the deputy U.S. attorney general, applauded the move.
Just 2 milligrams, the equivalent of a few grains of salt, an amount that can fit on the tip of your finger, can be lethal.
Now, local departments have implemented more training and issued protective clothes and gloves in order to prevent a tragedy within their ranks.
Now that we're dealing with synthetic drugs, the potency is hard to measure, and a lot of times they're toxic and they can cause overdoses, death, paralysis. So we're very concerned.
Now, in addition to protective gear, some departments are carrying around naloxone that could potentially counteract a lethal dose of that drug. Reporting live tonight, Ava Joy Burnett, WJZ Eyewitness News.
Ava Joy, thank you. And the opioid crisis is stretching across the nation. In Georgia, a new mystery street drug has led to 24 overdoses in the past 48 hours, with 4 deaths. State health officials say it is the largest cluster of opioid overdoses in state history. Health officials made a PSA pleading with people to stay away from it. Testing is being done to identify the pill and its dangerous ingredients.
Hi, I'm Chuck Rosenberg.
I'm honored to lead the men and women of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Please let me have a moment of your time. Why? Because this message about fentanyl could save your life or the life of a colleague. Fentanyl is deadly. Exposure to an amount equivalent to a few grains of sand can kill you. I need you to be safe, so please listen. Illegal fentanyl is causing a crisis in our nation. It is 40 to 50 times more potent than heroin. It is extremely dangerous to users and to those who simply come into contact with it. If you're a first responder, that could be you. What does fentanyl look like? It's a plain white powder. It looks a lot like traditional heroin, which looks a lot like basic cooking flour. Fentanyl is often mixed with heroin, or in some cases, even with cocaine. We also see fentanyl being pressed into pill form. Counterfeit pills that resemble things such as oxycodone and Xanax could contain fentanyl. And whether in pill or powder form, fentanyl is exceptionally dangerous. Please do not field test any substance you think might contain fentanyl. The DEA has put out guidelines for proper handling. You can find those guidelines here at the address at the bottom of this screen. Let me say this again. You can be in grave danger if you unintentionally come into contact with fentanyl. It can be absorbed into the bloodstream through your skin, through mucous membranes, or by touching your mouth, nose, or eyes after exposure, or even by accidentally breathing tiny amounts of airborne powder. And symptoms of exposure can include drowsiness, disorientation, difficulty breathing, pinpoint pupils, and clammy skin. As the fentanyl threat increases, so does the risk to you. Something that looks like heroin could be pure fentanyl. Assume the worst. Don't touch this stuff or the wrappings that it comes in without the proper personal protective equipment. Police canine handlers must also be careful. Your dogs are vulnerable too. If you think you've been exposed to fentanyl, seek medical attention immediately. Fentanyl acts very fast in the bloodstream. Notify medical personnel immediately that you or someone with you may have been exposed. Naloxone or Narcan can reverse the effects of fentanyl. However, multiple injections may be necessary. And make sure you get medical attention after. Please be safe. Help us spread the word. But first, listen to these two police officers from New Jersey. They're going to tell you what happened to them. They're okay, but it could have been tragic. Thanks for your time.
In the process of sealing the bag, just out of force of habit, I grabbed the bag and I closed it up, forcing the air out of it so I get a good seal. And when I did that, a bunch of it poofed up into the air, right into our face, and we ended up inhaling it.
I felt like my body was shutting down. People around me said that I looked really white, I lost color, and it just really felt like, thought that was it. I thought I was dying. That's what my body felt like. If I can imagine or describe a feeling where your body's completely shutting down and preparing to stop living, that's the feeling I felt.
You actually felt like you were dying. You couldn't breathe, very disoriented, and everything you did was exaggerated in your mind, I guess. It was the most bizarre feeling that I never ever would want to feel again, to be honest with you. And it was just a little bit. It was just a little bit of powder just puffed up in the air. It wasn't like the whole bag had dumped out or anything like that. It was just a very minuscule amount, and that's the scary thing about it. It was so quick and such a small amount that we didn't even have time to think.